Philippine Professional Standard for Teachers Domain 2 Learning Environment webinar series. For the discussion this afternoon, our topic will be promotion of purposive learning. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you're registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your question in the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by a speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kabibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker. Dr. Leonilo Bases Capulso is a multi-award winning Filipino master teacher, speaker, and researcher from Pampanga, Philippines. He is a senior high school master teacher at San Matias National High School, School Division Office of Pampanga, Region 3 of the Department of Education in the Philippines with over 2 decades of teaching experience. Leonilo is a Dangal ng Bayan award-winning educator. The Dangal ng Bayan Award from the Philippines government is conferred to an individual for performance of the extraordinary act or public service and consistent demonstration of exemplary ethical behavior on the basis of adherence to the Code of Conduct and ethical standards for the public officials and employees. He is also the recipient of Asian Achiever Award in 2019, Gawad Pat National Award in 2019, Outstanding Research Advocate of the Philippines Award in 2019, and Most Outstanding Teacher Award in 2018. As a research advocate, it has been his advocacy to promote the culture of research by developing school based research managements in the region. He has initiated research capacity building for new researchers in the government and private schools. His network with other international organizations became a bridge in hosting international research conferences in the Singapore, Bangkok, Philippines, and Vietnam. His love for less fortunate moved him to conduct studies and advocacies for community development in the depressed areas and initiated literary and faith program to select children of Macabebe, Pampanga, Philippines. As an educational leader, he has written contextualized curriculum modules for the values education for junior high school and written assessment and evaluation tool for the senior high school in the Department of Education. He holds a bachelor's degree in education, major in religious education, and master in religious studies, catechetics in Don Bosco Center of Studies, Parañaque City, and affiliate of Salesian Pontifical University, Rome, Italy. He took Master of Arts in Education in the La Salle University das Marinas. He has received two honorary doctorate in philosophy institution in Brazil. He is preparing for his final defense on emerging model and promoting and enhancing research productivity in basic education for his Doctor of Philosophy and Educational Management at the University of Assumption, San Fernando, Pampanga. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Leonilo Capulso.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Kabibal. Now I'm going to share with you my presentation. Okay, so once again, good afternoon. Uh, thank you, Bibal, for inviting me again to be in this platform to share about Philippine professional standards for teachers, particularly on promoting purposive learning, which is actually the domain number 2, strand number 5 of Philippine professional standards for teachers. So for this afternoon, these are the things we're going to discuss. We will have some review of the purpose of PPST, and then we will be discussing about purposive learning. As I mentioned earlier, this is the second domain, strand number 5 of the PPST. Then we will be discussing learning theories related to purposive learning. And lastly, we will be discussing about implication to teaching and learning of this theories in relation to purposive learning. Again, so for particularly for those in the Department of Education, we are very much familiar about PPST. But as a sort of review and in congruent to our discussion later on, you would realize why we have to review things we learned from the previous discussion. Again, this is the second domain already for strand number 5. So we have to review. So Philippine Professional Standard of Teachers is a public statement of what teachers need to know, value, and be able to do in their practice. So once again, as teachers of the department, may it be in the basic education or even in the higher education, we need to be aware. We need to review of the things we need to know as teachers of our own value system, and we must be able to practice them, of course. Then we should also be going through the 4 career stages of the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers, which are the beginning, proficient, highly proficient, and distinguished teachers. Third, it is built on the National Competency or Competency-Based Teacher Standards, or the NCBTS. It is comprised of 7 domains with 37 strands and 37 indicators for its career stage, the 4 career stages that I have mentioned earlier. So what is PPST for? So PPST is there in order to set out clear expectation of teachers along well-defined career stages of professional development from beginning to distinguished practice. So you would realize, ano ba yung pagkakaiba ng bagong guro lang, kagagraduate lang, kapapasok lang sa department, kaysa naman sa mga matagal na, lalong-lalo na those who are in significant positions already. PPST also aimed to engage teachers to actively embrace a continuing efforts in attaining proficiency, particularly in the time of the new normal. Apply a uniform measure to assess teachers' performance. For example, how are we supposed to adapt PPST in our flexible mechanism? How are we supposed to assess the performance of teachers? How are we supposed to identify the needs of the teachers based on the needs of our students and even the needs of our other educational stakeholders, and eventually provide support and professional development to our teachers. And this is, I think, the very reason why VIBAL is continually providing us this professional development through continuous webinars, Facebook Live, and even YouTube Live in order to capacitate our teachers. Now, let's go to our main topic, the second domain, or the learning environment. So we have to realize that domain number 2 highlights the role of teachers in order to provide learning environment that are safe, secure, fair, and supportive in order to promote learner responsibility and achievement. It has been our desire that the education that we provide to our students, whichever platforms we embrace, supposed to be safe and secure and fair and supportive. Unfortunately, as what we have heard so far from the news and even some posts in social media, there are some dangers of how students are being embarrassed because of untoward incident during online sessions. So how safe are our learning mechanism? So what the department is doing in order to sustain and to promote security of our students. Second, this domain centers on creating environment that is learning focused and in which teachers efficiently manage learner behavior in a physical and even virtual space. Nung normal pa yung ating educational system, I mean nung nasa pa tayo, it is easier for teachers to impose discipline and facilitate learning in the classroom because students are just in front of them. It just takes a lot of skills from teachers to to discipline and even to persuade students as to the kind of norms they have agreed to be followed in the classroom. Unfortunately now, because of virtual mechanism, because of the separation of teachers and students, the discipline now is now more on the role of the parents, of course, in support, in collaboration with the school. But just the same, the PPST see to it that teachers are providing this kind of environment that would help student focus on learning. Just the same, the purpose of education is to promote and to provide quality, relevant, and responsive education to students. The second domain also highlights the need for teachers to utilize a range of resources, online, printed, or shall we say, a combination, okay, a flexible mechanism for that matter, and provide intellectually challenging and stimulating activities. So there has been a lot of complaints about how students are having a hard time trying to answer their modules. We see in the news and even in social media, on the other side, some very motivated students who would even go up to the mountain, climb up the trees in order to attend to their class. So again, the teachers have this responsibility to provide that stimulating activities to encourage constructive classroom interaction, this time virtual interaction, that is geared towards the attainment of high standards of learning. Sabi ko nga sa kanina, hindi nagbago yung adhikain ng edukasyon kahit tayo man ay nasa virtual or face-to-face. We still have to provide quality education to our students regardless of mechanism we are adopting. It's just challenging that both teachers and students and parents and even LGUs are trying to capacitate themselves in order to provide the secure learning environment to our students. Now, PPST, particularly the second domain, would see to it that teachers are providing these necessities when it comes to learning environment. Learning environment has 6 strands. Okay, the first strand, I suppose this has already discussed, no? Learner safety and security. So that is why in our summary of what learning environment should be providing to students. So the first thing is to provide safety and security to our learners regardless of the mechanism we are adopting. Next, fair learning environment. Okay, it's supposed to be it in the spirit of justice regardless of your academic and economic status, management of classroom structure and activities, support for learners participation. Now, one of the possible topic that actually we could look into particular for us researchers is how are we supposed to engage students in our online learning. And of course, my main concern for this afternoon is to promote the purposive learning that I will elaborate in few minutes. And after me would be the management of learner behavior. So how is learning connected to behavior actually will be partly touch of this discussion. So what is expected now to us teachers? For beginning teachers, we are expected to demonstrate knowledge of learning environments that motivate learners to work productively regardless of mechanism by assuming responsibility of their own learning. So now we are looking into self-directed learning, learning wherein there is now the less intervention from the part of the school, from the part of the teachers. Now the responsibility now is on the student and on the parents and even the LGUs, of course, with the support of the school. Proficient teachers should apply a range of successful strategies. So from knowing to applying strategies to maintain learning environment that motivate learners. Again, to motivate learners. Because as early as now, there were already people who are saturated, who are having a hard time, no? Even our kasambahay, no, yung kasama namin sa bahay, she initially actually started to to stop, but we encourage her to continue because of course this mechanism is not easy, but again the teachers and we people around our learners should be able to motivate our learners to embrace this kind of mechanism that we have in order to assume responsibility of their own learning. For highly proficient teachers, for master teachers, we are expected to model successful strategies and support our colleagues in promoting learning environment that effectively motivate learners to work productively by assuming responsibility for their own learning. Medyo mas mabigat yung trabaho nating mga master teachers because we're supposed to model to our teachers, to teachers within our group. How are we supposed to provide quality, safe, fair, and purposive learning environment to our students? And of course, to the distinguished teachers, they are supposed to lead and empower their colleagues in promoting learning environment that effectively motivate learners to achieve quality outcomes by assuming responsibility for their own learning. Again, if we try to go back to from beginning to the distinguished teachers, we see the progression of the task, no, from only knowing to applying to modeling and to leading in promoting learning environment that will motivate students to own the kind of learning that they will have. Before I will proceed discussing about purposive learning, let me share to you this picture. No, what can you see? Uh, this is one thing that I with my wife really miss, no, particular during summertime, going somewhere else, going outside of the country, yung ang pagsakay sa eroplano, and of course hindi tatakbo yung eroplano kapag wala yung piloto. But there is that adage which says a pilot who doesn't know his destination, going to the right or going to the left is always a wrong direction. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Kapag ikaw ay piloto, kapag hindi mo alam kung saan ka talaga pupunta, ikakabig mo yan sa kanan or sa kaliwa, it will always be a wrong direction. So napakahalaga na alam ng piloto kung saan siya pupunta. And of course, we know that sa mga manlalakbay kagaya namin, every time we go, we take the plane, no? May it be locally or internationally, malinaw kung saan tayo pupunta, anong oras tayo aalis, anong oras tayo darating. And of course, that the pilot also have the same mechanism, have the same knowledge. Parang ganun din yung pagtuturo. Parang ganun din yung guro, no? Providing purposive learning is just like a pilot trying to control the plane. What does it mean? The Department of Education defines purposive learning as knowledge and skill acquisition designed with a clear purpose, goal, or objective in mind. Sa madaling salita, kapag sinabi mong purposive learning, ito yung kakayahan ng isang estudyante na magkaroon ng kaalaman at kakayahan na para magkaroon ng edukasyon at alam niya kung bakit niya ito gagawin at alam niya kung saan siya pupunta. So, he knows the way to that particular goal. So, kung susubukan nating isa-isahin yung kahulugan ng purposive learning, there are keywords that we could actually highlight. First, knowledge and skills acquisition. That is where learning actually happens. Okay? So, yung kaalaman at kakayahan na matutunan ng estudyante at hindi lang dapat niya matutunan, dapat malinaw din sa kanya kung bakit niya ito ginagawa at kung paano niya ito gagawin. 'Di ba may isang soft drinks na palaging advertisement, no? Ay mali, hindi pala soft drinks, isang coffee. Kagaya natin na mga addicts sa kape, no, who are very much fascinated with coffee. Ang tagline ay para kanino ka bumabangon, because we normally it's ang sarap uminom ng kape kapag madaling araw. Yung tipong kagigising mo lang, but for our case, you've been writing for quite some time. Yung hindi ka pa natutulog, marami ka pang dapat tapusin. So, kailangan mo ng kape. So, bakit ka ba gumigising? Para kanino ka gumigising? What motivates you to wake up? What motivates you to do what you are doing? So, to understand purposive learning, we need to understand some learning theories connected to purposive environment and purposive learning. Because we only have 1 hour to discuss, we will only focus on this at least two learning theories which are very much connected. First is the neo-behaviorism, which is actually connected to purposive behaviorism. Okay, so neo-behaviorism is a kind of behaviorism that takes an observable internal factor like cognition into account. Ibig sabihin, sa katuto ng estudyante, may nangyayari sa loob niya, okay, kung bakit siya natututo ng mga bagay na kanyang natutunan. Okay? Hindi lang doon sa kanyang ginagawa na nakikita ng mata, that is observable, but as the students try to acquire skills, there are also some mechanism inside him, particularly cognitive mechanism, that is happening. Okay? And sometimes this mechanism is not being observed. So take note of not being observed, because as we discussed the traditional behaviorist, we see the why it is called the neo-behaviorism. What else it is saying? According to neo-behaviorism, people create mental maps of things that they perceive. May mga bagay na paulit-ulit nating nararanasan, na nakikita, nababasa, nagkakaroon tayo ng parang mapa sa ating utak. Kaya nagkakaroon ng familiarity, nagkakaroon ng tinatawag nating composition of knowledge, acquisition of knowledge. These mental maps help them respond to other things, especially if this is similarity. Kapag nakita na natin yung isang bagay na naranasan na natin, nagre-react tayo kasi familiar tayo sa karanasan na to. Okay? Sometimes itong reaction natin is internal, hindi man natin pinapakita. Okay? Kung minsan naman, it is becoming obvious. No? So you begin by trial and error, which is behavioristic. Ibig sabihin, yung reaction natin dun sa karanasan ay kaagad siyang nakikita. Kung minsan naman ay sa loob lang, no? We just put it in our brain. Nasa mind lang natin yung ating, ay, ang ganda niyan. Pero you're not actually speaking it out. You're not actually displaying a reaction to that kind of knowledge that you have. So that is neo-behaviorism. Now, how is neo-behaviorism connected to purposive behaviorism? Actually, neo-behaviorism is a byproduct of two learning theory, which is purposive behaviorism, which what I will discuss, and the social learning theory of Bandura. But because I don't have the luxury of time, I doubt I could discuss the other theory. But let's focus to behaviorism or purposive behaviorism, since we're discussing about purposive learning. So purposive behaviorism is a branch of psychology introduced by Edward Tolman. So how is Edward Tolman different from the traditional and conservative behaviorist theorist? It, it combines the objective study of behavior while also considering the purpose or the goal of behavior. Kanina sinabi natin, sa purposive learning, hindi lang mahalaga sa mga estudyante na alam ko. Dapat malinaw sa kanya kung bakit ba kailangan kong matuto. Diba? Kung minsan nakaka-inspire, no? Nakakita tayo sa TV yung mga estudyante na kahit sa gitna ng daan or sa gilid ng daan ang dilim-dilim sila. While others have the luxury of light, the luxury of space, tamad na tamad silang mag-aral. So why do you think these people, these young learners, are having that kind of motivation? So Tolman taught that learning developed from knowledge about the environment and how organisms relate to its environment. Ang normal na naintindihan natin or those traditional behaviorism theory that we know is the stimulus and response mechanism. So, yun nga sabi natin, kapag may action, may reaction. So, may stimulus, may response. Pero, what Tolman is proposing is not necessarily a stimulus-response mechanism. According to Tolman, sometimes it is between stimuli and other stimuli. And it's not always a one-to-one relationship. We will elaborate that later as we try to dissect the principles that we can draw out of Tolman's purposive theory, or sometimes they called it the sign theory. Tolman's theorizing has been called purposive behaviorism, Tolman's theory, or which often considered the bridge between behaviorism and cognitive theory. So what Tolman actually did is to try to bridge between behavior and uh, the act of knowing. So yung kaparaanan ng pagkatuto ng isang estudyante ay may kinalaman sa kanyang motivation, sa kanyang goal. So uh, cognition and behavior are actually connected in Tolman's theory of purposive behaviorism. According to Tolman's theory of sign learning, they are actually called different names. No, it is sometimes called purposive behaviorism, or sometimes it is called sign learning theory of Tolman. According to him, an organism, a student, a teacher, learns by pursuing a sign to a goal. So, ibig sabihin, mas natututo tayo, mabilis tayong matuto kapag alam natin bakit tayo mag-aaral. Why are we learning? Why am I going to school? Bakit kailangan kong mag-aral kahit ang hirap-hirap? That is, learning is acquired through meaningful behavior. So, doon papasok later on yung motivation. So, where is the motivation of the student coming from? And what is the role of motivation in ensuring knowledge, in ensuring learning to our students? Now, question, how do we know that learning happens? So, epistemology tayo. No? Paano ba natin nalalaman na natututo nga yung isang estudyante? As teachers, in the new and the old normal, how do we know that students learn? Sa classroom, ang normal natin na ginagawa noon, quiz. No? So kapag dati hindi siya marunong, ngayon marunong na siya, natuto siya. That is before. No? That is how we actually assess learning. And that's correct. No? Behaviorists say that learning takes place when there is a change in behavior. In research, normally you do this by doing experimental research. No? So that's why you do some pre-test, and then you do intervention, then you do post-test. Nung pre-test, wala siya masyadong alam. So what I did is I teach this particular mechanism, and then I assess again, tumaas siya. So ibig sabihin, natuto siya because there is a change from the level of knowledge from not so high to very high, for example, okay, from failing to passing. So that is how behaviorists define learning. But the question is, can learning still happen even unobserved? Sabi natin, alam natin na natututo yung estudyante kapag may pagbabago sa kanyang ugali, sa hindi pagkatuto, papunta sa pagkatuto. How if that change is not observed? How if there is no reinforcement? No, I will elaborate about reinforcement. Bakit napakahalaga niyan? Kasi, sabi natin, mas natututo yung mga bata kapag sila ay nare-reinforce. Di ba? Kaya, during our foundation of education, we were taught to be appreciative of our students. Dapat nung nagpa-practice teaching tayo, marami tayong dala-dala para pag sumagot yung mga estudyante, mas naano sila, lalo silang namomotivate sumagot because of our reinforcement. May it be of grades or something material. But Tolman did an experiment, okay? Dahil dun sa tanong, maaari bang natututo pa din yung estudyante kahit hindi natin nakikita? Kung minsan, di ba, sa klase, isa sa pinoproblema, bakit parang may estudyante ako, parang hindi siya talaga nag-aaral? Bakit parang hindi siya natututo? How do you know that the student is not learning? So what Tolman did, he did an experiment. May tatlo siyang grupo ng mga daga na nilagay niya sa maze. Okay, so kaya I entitled it, The Three Group of Idiots or Wise Rats. Ang unang grupo sa unang experiment niya ay walang reinforcement, walang pagkain sa dulo. So nilagay niya sa simula ng maze, sa dulo wala, so walang pagkain. Yung pangalawang grupo ng mga daga, the second group of rats, if they're able to go out of the maze, they will have food at the end. The third group of rats, they don't have, it's just like group number 1. It's just that on the 11th day, so 10 araw walang pagkain. On the 11th day, nilagyan niya ng pagkain. Do you know what's the result? Alam niyo ba kung ano yung sagot? Anong nangyari? Look at this. No? Thanks for the screen. Kung nakikita nyo, on the right side is the average errors. Ibig sabihin ilang beses silang nagkamali na hindi nakalabas. Sa baba, yung ilang araw sila sa maze. Kung titingnan natin yung blue, okay? Yung blue sa ating map, yun yung sa dulo nila ay may pagkain. So sa unang araw, kung titingnan nyo, they failed only less than 28 times. Yung green, yun yung walang pagkain sa dulo. Kaya titingnan nyo, mas maraming beses sila nagkamali. Ibig sabihin, mas maraming beses silang hindi nakakalabas sa maze. Lalong-lalo na yung 10 araw na walang pagkain. But then, if you try to look at the tail of the graph, tingnan nyo yung pula. Yung pula, ito yung grupo ng mga daga na pagkatapos ng ika-10 araw, on the 11th day, si Tulman naglagay ng pagkain. And look at that, okay? Mas bumilis, no? Mas bumilis yung nakalabas yung mga daga na huli ng pinakain. Ibig sabihin, nung 10 araw na walang pagkain, hirap na hirap sila, kagaya lang sa number 1. Pero on the 11th day, mas mabilis pa sila doon sa pangalawang grupo na may pagkain. Then how do we explain this and how do we apply this to learning? Okay, now let's try to look at possible principles that we could apply. The first principle is learning is always purposive and goal-oriented. Kung napapansin nyo, dahil malinaw dun sa mga daga na may pagkain sila, ang bilis nilang nakakalabas. No? We are talking about dun sa second group. So an organism learns by pursuing the science to a goal. So kapag malinaw sa mga estudyante bakit sila mag-aaral, mas madali silang matututo. So what is the implication now to us teachers? Dapat sa pagtuturo natin online man yan o hindi, dapat malinaw sa mga estudyante ano ba yung ini-expect natin. Kaya kung babalikan natin yung mga modules na binibigay ng Department of Education and even higher education, sa unang-unang part palagi ng module nandun yung objective para malinaw sa estudyante kung nagawa niya ba ng tama yung ini-expect sa kanya na dapat niyang gawin. So that is the first principle in that purposive behaviorism. Second, latent or latent learning. According to Tolman, learning can happen even without us knowing it. It occurred yet unnoticed. So kahit kung minsan na akala natin hindi natututo yung estudyante natin, alam natin or dapat nating na malaman na may learning, may cognition na nangyayari sa loob niya na hindi niya lang pinapakita. Paano natin to intindihin? Balikan natin yung example ng pangatlong grupo ng daga. Remember, itong third group, 10 beses na siyang lumalabas doon sa maze. So sa madaling salita, familiar na siya doon. Alam niya na kung paano lumabas, kaso tinatamad lang siya kasi nga wala sigurong motivation. So no motivation show that they learn. But once reinforcement was presented, imagine on the 11th day, abrupt change or performance happen. Ang bilis niya kumaripas kasi may pagkain. So bakit ganun na lang siya kabilis lumabas on the 11th day? Because for the first to the 10th day, actually, the rats have made already latent learning. So, may nangyayari na sa kanya, nagiging familiar na siya. Parang ganito, we could actually, this is actually related to the third, no? Latent learning is related to the next principle. So, mamaya ko na lang sasabihin yung isang po pwedeng application natin sa personal na buhay. But as to education, when discussing a topic, as teachers, when we discuss our module, consider what students already know in order to facilitate maximum learning. This is the importance of always reviewing. Di ba? Kung mapapansin nyo, yung ating palaging preliminary activity is, alala nyo yung it's either pre-test, di ba, sa mga module ngayon natin sa PR2, nakikita ko may ganun, although may mga comment tayong konti doon, pero ang structure ganun pa din, no? Mayroon siyang pre-test or kaya ang isang activity KWL, no? KWL ibig sabihin gusto mo malaman kung ano na bang alam niya. Okay? Ano na bang alam ng bata? Because of connectivism, okay? It's another learning theory which is actually this latent learning is also connected. Na mas mabilis sa mga batang matuto kapag yung kanilang natutunan dati ay konektado sa matutunan nila ngayon. So that explains why the rats, the third group of rats, were able to go out of the maze faster than the earlier motivated rats. Okay? So tandaan natin, pag tayo ay gumagawa ng ating learning modules or kapag tayo nagtuturo, wag natin kalimutan na i-connect yung mga natutunan na ng mga estudyante kaysa bago natin i-introduce yung ating lesson. So that actually the principle behind review, okay, in our learning modules. Third principle, intervening variable. Ano naman yung intervening variable? Variables that are not readily seen but serve as determinant of behavior. Kagaya nun, sabi natin, bakit ba ang bilis-bilis makalabas ng daga? No? Tolman said, learning is mediated and is influenced by expectation, perceptions, representations, and needs, and other internal or environmental variables. Ibig sabihin, halimbawa, ako, bakit ba ako nagpursige? I was actually telling people, if you have read my book, I wrote it, how I started from rags. No? Madaling araw, gising na kami kasi nagtitinda kami sa palengke. O kaya, when I was still in Capiz, no? Madaling araw, pupunta kami ng dagat, mangunguha kami ng talaba, manghuhuli kami ng isda, tapos ibebenta namin. Yung kikitain ko, yun yung pambili ng project ko. Hanggang nakapag-high school ako, nakapag-college ako, hanggang umabot ako ng graduate school. Pero saan nang gagaling itong motivation? It's because of my experiences, because of my need. Gusto kong makaahon sa hirap. So that's my motivation. At dahil paulit-ulit ko na itong ginagawa, alam ko na siya kung paano gawin. No? So there must be something that motivated me, that motivated the rats to go out faster. And that is actually the food. So the intervening variable according to Tolman in this experiment is hunger. Dahil gutom siya at may naamoy siyang pagkain, kaya mabilis siyang kumaripas. So when learners are properly motivated, this intervening variable will actually push the students to become more motivated in learning, in acquiring knowledge. Okay? Susundan pa tayo. So another application. So present topics that are relevant to the needs of the students and will capture their interest. Ibig sabihin, kapag tayo ay gumagawa ng ating mga lesson, we always see to it that even the motivation that we do, now this is the purpose of motivation, we always start from where our students are. Diba? We ask them, kamusta na kayo? Kamusta naman yung inyong weekend? Or is there anyone who would like to share? And from there, you could actually start, no? You could springboard your lesson. We normally present our lesson from the experience of students. Create a relatable and fun activities in order to encourage learning. Mas magpa-participate sila kapag makaka-relate sila. That is why teachers should also be equipped with what is happening, no, of the signs of the times para relate. Pansinin mo, kahit medyo may edad na yung teacher, kapag nasusundan niya yung language ng mga bata, yung hindi lang bastos, mas mabilis natututo yung mga estudyante. Okay, the fourth principle is learning happens even in the absence of reinforcement. Kung napapansin natin, for the 10 days, yung daga, wala silang pagkain. Pero ibig ba sabihin nun, hindi sila natututo? So the third group of rats were actually learning even without the reinforcement to evidence that learning. So kapag tayo nagtuturo, kahit kung minsan hindi natin napapansin na yung mga estudyante natin ay ay nagpapakita ng pagkatuto, hindi ibig sabihin na hindi na sila natuto. We don't know exactly what's happening in their brain, in their mind, no? Because learning can even happen even without reinforcement. Ang tawag natin diyan ay intrinsic motivation that I will discuss towards the last part. Now, babalikan natin yung latent learning. Bakit ba ang bilis nakalabas ng daga? Sabi ko nga, because for the 10 days, familiar na siya dun sa maze. Another example, pwede nyo itong gawing personal experience. Subukan mo lumabas ng bahay pagkatapos nito. Tapos tabunan mo yung mata ng panyo, or you could simply close your eyes. And then go to your room. Sa palagay mo, kaya mong pumunta sa iyong room na nakapikit? Of course, it's not easier, but of course you can. Why? Because the place in the house are already familiar to you. This is the concept of cognitive maps. Okay, so exposure to the maze allows the rats to build mental models of their surroundings which they quickly solve the maze. Sa madaling salita, kapag ang estudyante ay sanay na siya sa ganung mga karanasan, mas madali na sa kanyang gawin. Parang ganito, kapag ginawa natin yan sa totoong buhay, kapag ikaw ay may nagdadaanan, halimbawa, niloko ka, alam mo na kung ano yung karanasan. That's why alam na alam mo kung anong pakiramdam. The next time, you know already what to do. Okay? In the same manner, in discussing topics, mahalaga yung paulit-ulit. Inuulit-ulit natin because we're actually trying to rebuild the mental models that our students have in their brain, in their mind, so that it will be easier for them to connect the next concepts we are about to present to them. These are internal representation of the external features or landmark. So yun yung cognitive maps. Nagkakaroon sila ng mental models na magiging na po pwede nilang sundan eventually as they continue their learning journey. So what is the application? A learner remembers new words by visualizing them represented in memorable fashion. This makes it easier and faster to recall these concepts. Kaya kagaya ko, kapag ako ay nagre-review, mahilig ako, kailangan nakaprint, and then I highlight. Diba? Minsan, we encircle. Other students have their own way of doing that. No? Cognitive maps are actually manifested by doing mind maps, visualization, association, mnemonics, using clues in reading comprehension, underlining keywords, scanning, self-testings. These are explanations of the importance of cognitive maps. Kasi kapag paulit-ulit natin ginagawa yung isang bagay, we are actually creating a mental framework in our mind that it's easier for us to understand and to remember concepts and eventually welcome new concepts. So, on a personal experience, this is actually what I told you that we can do. So let's proceed now to the last part of our discussion. If motivation is important to our students, then how do we motivate our students to learn? How do we help our students own their learning so that that learning will become significant to them? Students' motivation could either be intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Okay. Intrinsic motivation means or includes fascination with the subject, a sense of its relevance to life and the world, a sense of accomplishment in mastering it, and a sense of calling it. So sa madaling salita, ang isang estudyante na intrinsically motivated, ito yung kagustuhan niyang matuto ay nasa loob. May kahalagahan siya nakikita kung bakit niya ginagawa. Yung estudyanteng umakyat sa puno para lang magkaroon ng signal, siguro alam niya kung bakit niya kailangan gawin nun. The relevance of this present action to my future life. Okay? Or it could even be a relevance of this action because I have the past that is not so good, so I don't want that. That's why in one of my posts in Facebook, I said, do not let your past define who you are and what you will become. Instead, use all those past experiences and continually create yourself into becoming a better version of yourself and eventually make your life and the people around you much better than yesterday. Okay? So, what is the advantages of intrinsic motivation? Intrinsic motivation dahil sa'yo nanggagaling, it is long-lasting and self-sustaining. Hindi siya kaagad nawawala. So kahit marami pang pagsubok ang darating, nawawalan ka ng signal, nawawalan ka ng load, bumaba yung scores mo, but still dahil malinaw sa'yo kung bakit mo ito gagawin, you will continue, you will pursue with your online learning, with your modular learning. Building this kind of motivation would promote students' learning. Mas matuto ka, mas magpupursige ka kasi malinaw sa iyo kung bakit mo to gagawin, the purpose and the role of learning. Focus on subject rather than the reward of punishment. 'Di ba sabi natin kung babalikan natin yung behaviorist theory that it's the learning is normally affiliated with stimulus response mechanism. But sometimes learning can even happen even without reinforcement, that what we mentioned earlier. It's because of the internal or intrinsic motivation. The disadvantage of this is very slow to affect behavior and can require special and lengthy preparation, lalong-lalo na sa initially not so motivated. Kapag nagsimula kang hindi motivated in the study that I'm conducting now and the predictors of research productivity, self-efficacy and motivation were actually developed. Initially, medyo hindi nila nagustuhan yung research. But when they started doing research and they were able to appreciate the benefit of research, then they started to love research that until now, even without rewards, they continue to do so. But of course, it's not true to anyone. Needs variety of approaches to motivate students. Dahil nga, internal motivation or intrinsic motivation, kailangan natin ang different approaches to motivate students. Dahil nga iba-iba yung paraan ng pagkatuto ng ating mga estudyante. There's the need to know the interest of students to connect their interest to subject matter. So in order for us to connect the interest of our students to the topic we are discussing, as teachers, dapat malinaw sa atin kung ano yung mga hilig at pamamaraan ng pagkatuto ng ating estudyante. So that is why one of the design of lesson planning is the Assure model. No? Assure model would starts with identifying first the aptitude of students. Ano bang klaseng learners meron ako so that yung aking learning modalities, yung aking learning delivery would be responsive to their own learning styles. It is important to know the students, no? Napakahalaga, and teachers should also be interested. At the first place, mahirap gawing interested yung mga estudyante kung tayo din mismo hindi interested doon sa subject. How about extrinsic motivation? So, extrinsic motivation includes parental expectation. Kailangan kong tumaas kasi magagalit sa akin yung magulang ko o yung aking mga kapatid, matataas yung grades. Or expectation of other trusted role model. No? O maraming taong tumitingin sa'yo. So, you are supposed to maintain a high grade. Or earning a potential of a course study or grades. No? So, these are also motivation. For the rats, the food. For some students, maybe grades and other possible material rewards. Okay? The advantage of this, readily produce behavior changes and involve little effort or preparation. Bakit? Ang bilis mo i-motivate yung estudyante. O sabihin mo lang, o lahat ng ganito ay mai-exempt or lahat ng ganito ay magkakaroon ng ganitong reward. So it's easier to motivate students using extrinsic reinforcement. Do not require extensive knowledge of hindi mo na kailangang malaman kung anong hindi kailangang sobra, no? Compared to the intrinsic motivation. Kahit pahapyaw lang, mas mabilis mong makuha yung atensyon ng mga estudyante mo if you have a readily prepared motivation or reward to the students. The disadvantage can also distract students from learning the subject at hand. Bakit? Nag-focus na kasi sila dun sa reward. Challenging to devise appropriate rewards and punishment in response to students' behavior. Kasi nasa-saturate sila, so kailangan mas marami kang maiisip na reward system. Also needs to escalate rewards kasi nga sabi ko dapat nag-accumulate yan, tumataas yung iyong reward system, not working long term. Ang bilis nilang masaturate, ang bilis nilang mapagod. Students lose motivation without rewards or punishment. So yun yung mangyayari. kapag nasanay sila na kaya ako mag-aaral dahil mayroon akong reward, without that reward, eventually, it's easier or it's hard for you to motivate students anymore. Now, so what is the effects of motivation on learning styles? I'm actually towards the last part of my presentation. According to Bain of Harvard University Press, the effects of motivation on learning styles depends on the kind of learners. So according to the author, to our source, that there are three kinds of learners that is affected by motivation on their learning styles. The deep learners, strategic learners, and surface learners. So ito yung tatlong klase ng mag-aaral at paano ba ang motivation makakatulong or makakaapekto sa kanilang learning style. Una, deep learners respond to challenge of mastering a difficult and complex subject. So, ibig sabihin, ito yung mga estudyante na deep learners, ibig sabihin they are deeply motivated. These are intrinsically motivated students na hindi mo na kailangang i-motivate because they already have motivation. In the study I'm conducting, those students who are intrinsically motivated, kapag binigyan mo pa sila ng external motivation, ang tawag doon ay over-justification. Kapag na-over-justify yung mga intrinsically motivated students, nalilesen yung kanilang performance, yung kanilang productivity. Kasi nadadivert na yung kanilang reason why they are doing, why they are producing. The next is strategic learners. These are motivated primarily by reward. So sila yung mga nag-aaral dahil lang may premyo. So anong mangyayari kapag ang tawag sa kanila is also bulimic learners. Kapag tapos na yung exam, hindi na sila mag-aral. Okay? Kasi wala nang reward, tapos na. And they could actually easily forget what they have learned. Suggestion, for teachers, we need to handle them by avoiding appeals to competition. So dapat iwasan natin na dumarating sa kanila na palaging competition. Instead, appeal to intrinsic interest. Dapat from external rewards, we have to transform the motivation of our students. Bakit nga ba natin kailangang aralin to? Bakit kailangan nating mag-research for that matter? Design assignments and projects so that deep engagement with the subject is necessary for success on activities. Ibig sabihin, dapat malinaw sa kanila kung ano bang kahalagan, ano yung connection ng pinag-aaralan natin doon sa iyong buhay ngayon, sa buhay mo sa hinaharap. Requires students to apply, analyze, synthesize, or evaluate materials instead of comprehending or simple recall. This is the reason why Bloom's taxonomy is now centering into the higher order thinking skills, particularly on creating. So the highest form of learning is when students are able to create knowledge. That is why constructivism as a philosophy is very much engaged, very much related to Bloom's taxonomy. Kasi in relation to behaviorist theory, mas alam natin na natututo siya kapag mayroong change of behavior or change of learning capacity. Another is surface learners, motivated by desire to avoid failures. Ito naman yung mga estudyanteng takot magkamali, no? They avoid deep learning. Ayaw nila yung sobrang malalim na pag-aaral because they find it very risky, nakakatakot. Do what it takes to pass the test. Gagawin lang nila, ipapasa lang nila, but they won't go beyond the minimum required for the fear of failure. Dahil ayaw nilang magkamali, they are afraid to fail, they will not go beyond what is minimum. Okay, suggestion for teachers. Actually, I think this is the last part of my presentation. Help them gain confidence. So kailangan from surface learners, we will convert them into actually deep learners. No, help them to gain confidence that you could actually go beyond, you could transcend. No, we teach them metacognition, meta-analysis, scaffold materials by designing a series of activities that build on each other over time in complexity and challenge them. Ibig sabihin, dapat nakita nila ano yung relasyon ng pinag-aralan ko nung grade school sa pinag-aralan ko sa junior high school, sa pinag-aralan ko sa senior high school, pinag-aralan ko sa college, sa graduate school. Or anong pinag-aralan ko ngayong SEM sa susunod na SEM. That is why di ba, ang K-12 education ay ganun, nasa progression tayo because one is building on another. So scaffolding. Now, here we see Vygotsky and other psychologists who are playing very important role. Encourage students often and help them reflect what they have learned and what they have accomplished. So bakit ba kailangan natin matuto? Ano yung natutunan natin? Paano natin magagamit yung natutunan natin para mas maging mabuting estudyante? So if you try to go back, we just have discussed the importance of purposive learning, what are theory or learning theory connected to purposive learning, what is purposive behaviorism, and the principles of Tolman. And we also discussed the effects and the importance of motivation. So all this put together will help our students acquire a purposive learning where students not only acquire knowledge, but they are able to develop the purpose why they are doing that. Okay? Now, uh, to end, um, I think my screen is having some technical problem. I hope it works. Okay. Mm. Hi, ma'am.
Yes po, sir.
Ma'am, actually, I'm done. That's actually the last page for me.
Okay po.
Okay.
Thank you very much po, Doc Kapul. So, mag-proceed po to the question and answer po. Ayan po. So, we have some questions here from our viewers. The first one is from Miss Leonora Alvarez.
Yes, please.
How can teachers promote a positive learning environment if the teacher himself or herself does not have one? For example po, mahina po ang internet connectivity ni teacher or kulang po sa gamit or gadget si teacher.
Okay. Hi, ma'am. That's actually very timely and very realistic question. It's hard to give something which we do not have. That is why one of the requirement of providing purposive learning is that for teachers to motivate students, they must themselves be motivated. I think it again challenges the teachers of her own intrinsic motivation of teaching. Ang mga guro, tayo naman masyado tayong maparaan. Naalala nyo yung mga guro na umaakyat pa sa bubong, no? Umaakyat pa sa bubong para lang makakuha ng signal. And of course, for those who are having some difficulty and challenges when it comes to online connectivity, I think the Department of Education also provide other mechanism like printed module. If you are familiar with Global Teachers Prize, yung mga nananalo doon ay nakakuha ng $1 million. Ang isa sa mga uh, nominees doon actually, ang ginawa niya ay dahil sa kahirapan ng kanyang mga estudyante, hinahayaan niyang mga estudyante niyang mag-share sa kanyang wifi. And of course, there are other ways to respond to this kind of challenges. Kapag si teacher na kasi yung mawala ng motivation, it's hard for us to motivate also students. So I think it calls for the intrinsic motivation of the teacher themselves.
Thank you so much po, sir. The next one is from Mr. Diosdado Avendaño. How do we foster deep learning for our modular distance learners, sir?
Okay. It's actually very challenging to develop deep learning when particularly if students themselves are not properly motivated. But ganito na lang yung iisipin natin. Nung hindi pa new normal, nung face-to-face pa, nahihirapan na tayong mag-develop ng deep learning. So, ang sinasabi ko, kung ano yung kaparaanan natin, what we do actually to develop deep learning to students face-to-face is the same mechanism we could also do with our students. And the way to do it is to make our learning interactive. Halimbawa, kahit modular lang kayo, hindi lang naman yun yung paraan pwede tayo magkaroon ng connection in order for us to motivate our students. For example, in the case of our division office, yung mga teacher, dahil ang mga estudyante nila ay nahihirapan sa load, ang gagawin, yung feedback mechanism nila ay ginagamitan nila ng text. Yung iba naman ay pwede naman na isama dun sa susunod na module. Deep learning is actually developed when a teacher is able to help student find the meaning of why he is doing that. So kapag ang estudyante nakita niya yung kahalagahan kung bakit siya mag-aaral kahit pa may pandemya, kahit pa walang internet, it's not impossible for teacher to encourage student. I think it's challenging, I know, it's hard, but teachers could always find ways to encourage students. No, maybe you could use your own experience in order to encourage your student. You enable students to dream, no? Ang tawag natin dito engineering, no? You help students imagine what they can do in order to make the best of what they have at the moment kahit pa may pandemya. And even that, we could still develop deep learning with our students. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. That's all the question that we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers for this afternoon po?
Okay. So once again, mga ka-Vival, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Vival Publishing, Ma'am Mitch and Ma'am Jel. Thank you for always being there for their initiative. Again, for us teachers, teaching in times of pandemic is actually very challenging. And to develop deep learning is also another challenge. But once students are able to see the importance of education, why they are doing this, it's actually easier for us to convince them that regardless of mechanism that we adopt, uh, education can still be provided to them, education that is quality or with quality, education that is relatable to their own experience. At the end of the day, the purpose of education is to turn mirrors into windows. No? Ibig sabihin that out of the learning, sabi nga ni Einstein, learning happens when what the students learn from the classroom is gone. So kung ano yung ginawa niya pagkatapos niyang makinig sa teacher, yun talaga yung learning. At mangyayari lang yun kapag si estudyante, kapag ang student, alam niya kung bakit siya nag-aaral. So again, let's go back to these principles that we discussed. At the end of the day, babalikan ko yung aking kaninang keynote na adage, no, a pilot who doesn't know his destination going to the right and to the left or always be a wrong direction. As students and as teachers, dapat malinaw sa atin kung ano yung gusto nating gawin sa buhay natin. Para anumang mga pagsubok, wala mang internet, mahirap yung module, patuloy pa din nating maibigay yung quality education sa ating mga estudyante. And for students, patuloy pa din nating matatanggap yung quality education that will make us better citizens of tomorrow, regardless of our challenges, regardless of our past. No? So once again, good afternoon everyone at mabuhay tayong lahat, mabuhay tayong mga ka-Vival. Ma'am?
There we have it. In behalf of VIBAL Group Incorporated, I would like to thank you, sir, for being our speaker this afternoon for this inspiring, motivating learning session. It is truly an honor to have you with us today, sir. And to all our Kabibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. We encourage you to subscribe and watch on our official Bibal Facebook page and YouTube channel. Muli maraming salamat. Magandang araw sa ating lahat.